Last time we tried the tape recovery, this happened. And that's because I hadn't practiced it, which was entirely what the video was all about. So I've gone and practiced it, and in this video you're going to see the entirety of one button disaster recovery from start to finish, and it totally works. You'll see the configuration I used, the end result, and how long it took to get there. I've also got a little gotcha that nearly caught me out at the end, which is to do with Windows 2003 activation, but I've got a fix for it. So stay to the end of the video to see that one. Right, let's get cracking with this now. Okay, we're back on the 2003 server. And now, if we have a look at the server I've installed, we've got the right version, 2003 for small business, which means when we load up Veritas, we've got the tape drive using the plug and play drivers. Next, what we need to do is configure the wizard for intelligent disaster recovery. And we're going to use the bootable tape image as before, but it's going to work this time. And it's going to require the Windows CD. We'll delete the one that I used before in the past. Where is the CD? That is E drive. Picks up the key automatically. I'm going to add the ASR, the automated system recovery, to the CD image, so we won't need a floppy disk for that. And now it's going to write this and it will do it properly and it'll actually finish. Where this went wrong last time was because I had the wrong version of Small Business Server. I had release 2, the R2 version. This bit didn't work. It got most of the way there, but it didn't quite complete, which is why when I tried to do the full recovery, there was that error at the end about sp1.cab file not being there. What I suspect is that it partly works and it partly writes the right information to the unattended setup, but there's a little bit that's incorrect because of a version misconfiguration, and that's what happened. While we're waiting for that to go through, if we have a look here on my computer, we also need one floppy disk, and that's this one here. Nothing on it at the moment, and what we're going to do is add the drivers for the array controller, and I'm going to extract those straight onto the floppy disk. Kind of missed this bit here. Look how long it takes to do it. It takes a long time to write to a floppy disk. It's a properly slow form of media to use. You can hear it sort of chugging away in the background. Okay, that's finished now. We can check the floppy disk. Those are the drivers that we'll need when we do the recovery process to tell it where to find the RAID array controller. And this is finished. It's correct. Activated tape image is done. So now what you have to do is run a full backup, which I've already got on the tape. So actually the next point is to reboot this server, get to it in ILO and go through the recovery process. Okay, the clock is running. Stopwatch is on. Unfortunately, as much as I tried, I couldn't capture the VGA output from the server using the new HDMI to VGA connector I've got. But we're lucky enough to have ILO, which we've got on the screen at the moment. ILO is now going to offer to press F8 on the tape drive for one button disaster recovery, which I'm going to press now. Then I press number 1 for that. And it says one button disaster recovery, but it's a bit misleading because actually what it meant by one button was that you could hold the tape button down on the front of the tape drive and it would put it into this recovery mode. I'm now going to select 0 for the tape drive that's there, and it's going to reboot the server, and then it's going to boot off the tape drive. The number of buttons you actually have to press to do the disaster recovery is minimal. I don't know how many it is, but it's less than 10. So it's pretty good. But I think one button is probably put in there more as a bit of a marketing spin than it was a reality of what was going on. What's coming up shortly is a key combination that has to be done pretty quickly. It'll boot to big purpley pink screen and you press enter to start the disaster recovery process. It boots to this screen so you can do a test. You can test that your tapes work. But once you press enter, you've got to quickly press F6 so that you can tell the Windows setup installation that you need to put the driver in for the RAID array controller. And then you have to press F2 to tell it to use ASR, automated server recovery, so that it automatically configures the partitions and saves the information that you did in the intelligent disaster recovery wizard. So it's up on screen now. I press enter and you'll see it flash up for a moment on screen. Press F6 now, which I do. And then following that, we're going to see press F2, and the F2 one, you haven't got long at all. Now, if you don't press F2 at that point, what happens is it will go through the process of the recovery, but you have to make all the selections, i.e. it's like a standard Windows installation. And that's going to go wrong later on because it isn't going to launch the miniature small version of Backup Exec that you can use to recover the files before Windows has finished installing. What's interesting here is You press F to specify the SCSI adapter driver, which I've got on a floppy disk. So we'll put the floppy disk in now. Press enter, reads the floppy disk drive, go down and choose the 641 array controller, and it already says that it's got one that you can use. So you press enter to carry on. But if you don't use the floppy disk and you don't tell it to have a look for a driver, it won't find the driver. I can only imagine that was a bug. I've tested it a couple of times and it doesn't find the driver, but it does find the driver if you push it towards another driver first, but you don't use it. So I'm not quite sure what went on at that point. It's now going to carry on going through the complete installation process, and it'll be quite a while before we'll come back to this and actually need to get involved in the recovery part. Now at this point, the screensaver kicks in because I hadn't done anything for so long, which is why it's all gone black. And in a moment, I'll notice this and give it a little nudge and bring it back into life again. That's not a bad indication of how little you had to do in this recovery process, that the screensaver would eventually kick in and take over. There it is. And at which point, yeah, there we go. I've noticed it now and I've given it a nudge and it'll carry on installing. Now it gets interesting. It's going to launch the disaster recovery wizard. So Backup Exec now is running a miniature version of itself, which is enough for you to continue the recovery of the data halfway through the Windows installation setup. Now, if it looks like I'm moving really slowly with my mouse, what's happening here is that I couldn't catch the mouse inside the ILO to click on the next button. So I'm moving it around on the outside like this, trying to do it. And eventually I decided to use the keyboard ML to do it. And I went with the automated process. You did have options there for assisted and manual to choose separate setups. But I decided to just go with the automate because that's what I've tested and it works. That's because there I haven't clicked on the server name NTN because I was on the keyboard and I hadn't used tab, but I've managed to catch the mouse inside it now. So I'll click on back and then I'll go and select the actual server to do this. It was quite frustrating. You wouldn't normally have this issue because when you were doing it in a workshop environment at the time, you wouldn't have been using, well, it's highly unlikely you would have been using ILO. I guess maybe you could have, but it was pretty likely for a backup and recovery you'd have been there. There we go. Now I can get it. I've got the mouse and I can get on to selecting the server and choosing next. It's asking for the DR file. I don't need that because that's Windows 2000. This is going to load the tape drivers, and the tape drivers are plug and play, which means the operating system's got them built in, and it's going to be able to find my tape drive, which was good that you didn't have to introduce your own tape drive at this point as well, because that would have been one extra thing that you would have had to remember to have kept in your DR recovery pack for when you were doing this. It's detected the HP on there. Again, I managed to get onto it and click on next. Come on, there you go. Yep, tape drive. Now it starts rewinding the tape so it can read what's on the tape at the beginning of the tape. Now it's worked out what's on the tape and I'm going to choose to restore set one. Set one being all of the data. And now that's going to start recovering all the data. And there you can see it goes off pretty quick. The DAT72 was a reasonably quick tape drive, and it gives you an overview of what it is that you're actually recovering, when it was from, which was from the 9th of July, the destination it's recovering to, how many bytes you've got through, and what directory it's in at that point in time. It happened again that the screensaver kicked in. I think I was watching lazy game reviews on YouTube. I'm going to click restore set here, and that is the shadow copy, which is the registry, the system components, the users in, and the user database that's on the server. It's all of that information that it puts back in. This doesn't take as long to recover because it's a pretty small amount of data, but absolutely critical. Without this, you've got none of your authentication locally on the server. You've got none of your registry. Nothing's going to work without this bit. This bit's more important than the data. You could pull the data in a recovery situation from another tape. And I did have situations where one tape was corrupted. If you add this bit, you're okay. The other bits you could piecemeal from other tapes and put into place and sort of build back the structure of what it was that you needed. But if you didn't have this, you were never going to start this server and get back to where you were. Finally, it's ended. It asks if you've got any more data to recover. So I click on finish because there's no more tapes. It's the one tape that I did. And that's it. You can click finish and it will reboot Windows and boot back into your recovered server. Gave you a couple of other options there to run command. Maybe you needed to run some other specific commands on the server afterwards to make changes. or to other modifications that you wanted to do. You could look at the boot.ini as well, which shows you how the server's going to start and which partitions. That would probably not be a bad idea to see if the partitions are right. But I think most people are probably just going to want to restart it and see what happens. And there's your error messages. Some files, I mean, there was no way you ever got every single file backed up without there being an issue. Usually they were either open or Windows couldn't work out whether they were maybe corrupted or not. In this instance, I found that none of those files were important to the actual recovery of the server. And we're going to reboot now and get back to the operating system. And finally, Windows boots back up to Control-Alt-Delete, and you can log back in and the server's completely recovered. That's it. We'll stop the watch. 54 minutes and 18 seconds. That's not too bad. That is not too bad at all. So what have I learned at the end of this process? Well, I've learned that if I'd done disaster recovery preparation back when I was an engineer and MSP, I wouldn't have had half the grief that I did. It really did make a difference. However, I had to put a lot of time into it. I've probably done 10 plus hours of recovery. Now, some of that's going to be the fact that I'm 51 years old and haven't done it for a while and I was refreshing myself. Realistically though, there's a good 8 hours of trial and error to get to the point where I can recover this server every single time and repeat the process, which is what this video has gone through. If I'd done that back when I was servicing servers for customers, I know I could have saved a lot of grief and stress, but there simply wasn't time and nobody would listen about making that time, and I didn't have the weight or the ability to push back on it enough. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned there was a gotcha that caught me out right at the end. I'll take you through that now. The gotcha I was talking about is this. You come to log back into Windows 2003 Server after you've done your restore, and you get this message. Windows needs activating, which you can't do. You can't do it online, you can't do it over the telephone, and there's no other option. All you can do is press cancel, and that shuts down the operating system. So what do? Well, the answer lies in safe mode, and you need to press F8 now in order to get into safe mode. Now I can choose safe mode, which loads a version of Windows with minimal drivers. And once I'm in safe mode, I can run a command in command prompt that will reset the grace period for activation back to 30 days, meaning I can get back into the operating system again. You're about to see Windows 2003 at 640 by 480 VGA graphics. Oh, it's going to be big. I told you it was big. Now we're logged on, and that's simply telling us we're in safe mode. We can run the command, and it is run DLL32 syssetup setup OobeSetupBnk. Nothing happens. All we do is reboot now, and Windows will let us back in. Will Windows let us log in? Yes, it will. That's a handy feature to know. It gives you 30 days grace on the activation. I'll put the command in the description of the video. I hope you've enjoyed this series. We've managed to back up and restore the entire server using one tape and one floppy disk in under an hour. I'm quite happy with that. If I'd practiced this years ago when I was an engineer, I'd have saved myself a lot of stress. The next playlist is going to be my HP OmniBook 900. I bought it off eBay for £9. It's going to take some work to get that up and running. Please like and subscribe the video. It means loads to me. I'm doing this from scratch and starting out, and it's lots of fun, and I hope you're sharing that fun with me. I'll see you on the next video. Ta-da!